Live Fit Podcast, episode 97, Bodywise, with Dr. Rachel Abrams.
But if we want to get to the root cause of what helps people feel better, then we really have to look into their own body wisdom. And that's what Bodywise is all about, giving people very practical tools to listen to their own bodies in order to guide their healthcare and even, their choices about the healthcare providers that they choose.
She says that people need to trust their gut instinct and listen to themselves and be aware of their body to help guide medical treatment.
So the best test I have, the best diagnostic tool is the person sitting in that room with me. And so I am trying to draw out of that woman or that man where their symptoms come from, what they're suffering from, what their life is like, and all the different factors that are contributing to them not feeling well.
Dr. Abrams is a medical doctor and a holistic physician, which means she doesn't go to drugs automatically. She will use them when they're necessary, but that is not her knee-jerk approach to helping a person heal their body.
Excellent study in one of the premier medical journals last year that proved that medication side effects are the third leading cause of death in our country. And this study was a conservative estimate because they were literally only looking at hospital outcomes. And if you take into account all of the outpatient reactions that kill people, we've got a much bigger number. So to say that drugs are not a problem is just ignorant by the data.
Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson, your resource for all things that contribute to good health. You will hear expert advice and interviews with leading authorities on fitness, food, fat loss, mindset, and the mind-body connection. You will find show notes, articles, and health programs at livefitpodcast.com.
Ah, yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Johnson, your guide to better health. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share this episode with everybody you care about. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Rachel Abrams. She received her MD from UC San Francisco and her master's degree in holistic health from UC Berkeley. She is board certified in family medicine and integrative medicine. In 2008, she opened the award-winning Santa Cruz Integrative Medicine Clinic. Dr. Abrams treats many of the world's most influential people, from CEOs to billionaire entrepreneurs to Nobel Peace Laureates. She has been voted Best Doctor in Santa Cruz County every year from 2009 to 2016. Dr. Rachel's upcoming book, Bodywise, Discovering Your Body's Intelligence for Lifelong Health and Healing, will be available at the end of this year, 2016. Dr. Rachel's other publications include The Man's Guide to Women, The Multi-Orgasmic Woman, The Multi-Orgasmic Couple, and Who Could Resist the audiobook, Taoist Sexual Secrets. Dr. Rachel has taught more than 50 classes and workshops and has been an expert consultant on holistic health for national magazines, radio, and television for the last 20 years. If you'd like to support this show, please go to patreon.com/livefitpodcast, or you can click on the link at the bottom of every show notes page. I'd also like to remind you that I offer health coaching, weight management, and health improvement programs. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me at glenn@livefitpodcast.com, or you can leave a voice message by clicking on the orange tab on the right-hand side of every screen on the website. Now let's listen to my interview with Dr. Rachel Abrams. Hi, Rachel. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Glenn. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it is so good to have you on the show. And when I heard about your book, Bodywise, and the topic of body intelligence, I really had to hear more about it because, as my listeners know, that is something that I'm really big on, is really listening to and understanding your body. In other words, being wise, body wise. So I want to hear about that. And I know you have some other books, so we can touch on that as well. But first, if you would, tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and how you got to this point.
Sure. So I'm a family practice doc, have been for over 2 decades. And I have been interested in holistic and integrative medicine basically my entire adulthood. And I've been running an integrative medicine practice for the past 9 years. And what that means to me is that when I see a patient, I'm a regular doctor. So if I need drugs, I use them. But I'm really trying to help each person that walks into my office, men, women, and kids, to really listen inside themselves to guide their healthcare. So the best test I have, the best diagnostic tool is the person sitting in that room with me. And so I am trying to draw out of that woman or that man where their symptoms come from, what they're suffering from, what their life is like, and all the different factors that are contributing to them not feeling well. And that could be their job, and that could be their relationships, or that could be their food choices, or that could be, a history of childhood trauma. But all of those things actually act to impact that person in the room. And if we want to treat symptoms, we can just use drugs or even supplements. But if we want to get to the root cause of what helps people feel better, then we really have to look into their own body wisdom. And that's what Bodywise is all about, giving people very practical tools to listen to their own bodies in order to guide their healthcare and even, their choices about the healthcare providers that they choose.
Wow, that is so wonderful. That is great work. I love this topic because so many people are either oblivious to their bodies or they're not, and they tell their doctor what's going on, and the doctor doesn't believe them, basically says, well, you're not a doctor. Why should I listen to you? I hate that attitude, and they tend to want to just mask it with some drugs or procedures or something. And that's, it has its place, but it's not always the best option, and it shouldn't be the first.
I couldn't more wholeheartedly agree with you. And I could tell you 50 stories from the past month in my practice of people who have come in on the verge of having surgery or on the verge of taking severe drugs for, say, rheumatic arthritis or, serious autoimmune disease. And, some of those drugs are chemotherapy agents. And they're very serious. When what was going on with that person, when we really got down to it, was that the episode was triggered by stress, usually at a job or a relationship. And that when we dealt with that and we helped them be more calm, and usually some other allergic trigger, like maybe they're, gluten intolerant, or maybe, some other aspect of anger or stimulation in their life is triggering this poor immune response, this bad immune response. And when we deal with those factors, it looks miraculous, even though what we're using is lifestyle change, dietary change, identifying triggers. But lots and lots of my patients are able to scale back on their medication or stop them completely or, not use them in the first place. And that's always what I'm looking for. How do we help someone really heal from the inside out with as few things they're sticking in their mouth, meaning medications or supplements, as possible?
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know a lot of things can just be remedied by smart eating or eating in a certain way. And certainly if you're gluten intolerant, it seems like a no-brainer to not eat gluten. But I know people that still do it. They're gluten intolerant, and yet they still try to sneak it in like, oh, this time it won't hurt me. This time it won't bother me. But then again, of course, it always does. And it tends to exacerbate each time, leads to a worse time after that, correct?
Yes. And, I also think it's really, the reason I love the subject of being body intelligent is that no healthcare person, and that includes you and me, can tell anybody else what they have to do. I mean, there's certain things that we know, like you and I know it's bad to eat fast food and it's, bad to never exercise. I mean, there's certain things that seem to be pretty much agreed upon, but a lot of things like gluten is an excellent example. There are many people who are not gluten intolerant and not gluten allergic. And then there are folks for whom eating any gluten at all has a devastating effect on their digestive system. And you really have to listen to yourself. So the example you gave, of course, is of someone who's not listening, right? They know, but they're not doing it. And I mean, I've had people with, rheumatoid arthritis, with inflammatory bowel disease, with daily migraines, who were literally cured by stopping gluten. So for somebody who's truly gluten allergic, it can have a dramatic effect. And I agree with you. You got to listen to your body, or, something simpler, even like alcohol, right? And a lot of us, as we get older, we don't detoxify quite as well. We can't drink quite as much as we used to, but we do it anyway and we feel terrible, right?
Yeah.
So, simple things just like, okay, I know I feel great when I have a glass of wine or maybe two. And if I go beyond that, I feel terrible. These are the sometimes not so subtle signals our bodies are giving us. And if we listen, we can have a glass of wine, or maybe the slightly gluten sensitive person can have, toast once a week. They just can't eat pasta every night. It's a matter of moderating depending on how your own body responds.
Rachel, I was watching TV with my kids the other day, and a commercial came on for a drug, and they pointed out that the side effects of this drug are potentially worse than the reason you're taking the drug in the first place. All the disclaimers they say at the end, and this list and some of the things they name. And of course, that not everybody's going to have all of those, or maybe even they might not have any of them. But just the fact that the risk of all these different side effects are so horrible, it makes you wonder why anybody would take it. But my biggest problem is that they're advertised to the consumer. Now, I'm wondering, my question to you is, have you seen patients that take a drug because they saw it advertised on TV or in a magazine and convinced their doctor they needed it?
Yeah, advertising is done because marketers are smart and they know it works. So yes, people will then walk into my office and go, hey, I heard about this antidepressant, or I heard about, they're advertising drugs that literally are like chemotherapy on television. And it's really distressing.
Wow.
For a number of reasons. So you're probably aware of this, but there was an excellent study in one of the premier medical journals last year that proved that medication side effects are the third leading cause of death in our country. Okay. And
Wow.
this study was a conservative estimate because they were literally only looking at hospital outcomes. And if you take into account all of the outpatient reactions that kill people, we've got a much bigger number. So to say that drugs are not a problem is just ignorant by the data. And to advertise them on television, I think, is immoral because people don't know, they don't realize. And then the other thing that's really frustrating is that a lot of these drugs, antidepressants are a really good example, are not effective. So antidepressants have no efficacy for mild or moderate depression. I don't think most people are aware of this, but the SSRIs, the commonly used ones, Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, Lexapro, any of those, they literally are not better than placebo.
Wow.
For mild to moderate depression, okay? And even worse, for major depression, so more serious depression, they are effective, but they're effective for a short period of time. So, for example, there was a study last year, head-to-head Zoloft, one of these SSRIs, and exercise. Okay,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
At 3 months into the study, the exercise people and the Zoloft people were less depressed. So both were effective. At 9 months, the Zoloft people were depressed again. The exercise people were still not depressed. So you tell me, am I going to take a drug that kills my sex drive and interferes with orgasm and flattens my mood that only works for 3 months? Or am I going to exercise, which works ongoing?
Well, based on two of the books you've written, I know your answer.
Right. Because sexuality, in my opinion, is just an expression of your vitality, of your life force, of your wellness. So not to talk about it in a medical context is silly.
Yeah, exactly. How does a person become Bodywise?
So I actually, in this book, try to break it down to very simple. It's just paying attention to your sensations. And that sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't feel what's happening in their body. And what I mean is literally, I'm the feeling of being hungry or different. And then, on the first level, or I have to go pee, which lots of people feel and ignore, especially busy people.
Right.
So feeling your sensations, getting a sense of them, and then what emotions are attached to those sensations. Because you and I know you can get a pit in your stomach because you're nervous or scared. You can get what feels like a pit in what we call a pit in your stomach, or a squeezing in your stomach because you're hungry. Or you can have a similar gnawing sensation because you have an ulcer. So getting a sense of what emotions are associated with that sensation is helpful. And then discerning, so a little higher level, looking at data you may have collected, like lab tests from your doctor, for example, along with the sensation, along with the emotions, allows you to discern what this pattern of sensations means to you. So, is that stomach grumbling really hunger? Or am I anxious? And I'm eating because I'm anxious rather than because I'm hungry. These tiny, simple little things are huge, because so many of us, make choices based on our emotions rather than our body's actual needs. And when we differentiate and are able to feel our body's needs, we make better choices. We make choices that make our bodies happy. And I want, through helping people be body wise, to help people choose a life that their body loves. Because when you do that, you feel vital and you have more joy and you have less pain.
And you can have that too. And I think a lot of people don't really believe that they can feel better and they can have more energy and they can be happier. They use, obviously, I mean, this, people use food as a drug so often, and they just go from, one high to another, so to speak.
Yep.
And it's really sad. And I've talked to people about this before, and they nod their head and say, yeah, I understand. But then they go about their business and keep living the way they've been living, and drinking one soda after another, several per day, and, eating the white starches and all those things. It's really difficult to talk somebody into understanding what you and I know. Any tips for that?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just going to say the reason you and I know it is because we can feel in our bodies how different it feels to drink water and green tea all day instead of Coca-Cola, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have that body experience. And I think a lot of times we have to help people have the body experience of wellness. So for example, I like to get people to agree to say 1 month, or even 2 weeks on a healthier diet, whatever it is, and for one person, it may be no fast food. For another person, it may be no soda, but just a small period of time. And in that small period of time, they get to feel, number one, why it is I drink it in the first place, because we're not stupid, right? We choose these things for a reason. And lots of people are drinking soda because the sugar and the caffeine gives them a little burst of energy. And that makes sense to me. But there are other ways that you can get little bursts of energy that are not going to make you ill in the long run, and that are not going to make you crash on the other end of it. Because when we push ourselves with sugar and caffeine, we increase our cortisol and our adrenaline, and a couple hours later we crash and we're much tireder than we were when we started.
Yeah, and it works really well. And I like 99% of the time I get scoffed at when I make this recommendation. Do a little bit of exercise. You could do 20 jumping jacks, or some push-ups, or some squats, or lunges, or even a brisk walk. And so many people roll their eyes and, oh yeah, but I don't. If I wanted to do that, I don't have the energy to do that, so they don't do it. But where do you get energy?
Right. So
from energy.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I'm going to agree with you that, you and I are speaking from the perspective of the converted. And what I usually do with people is try to give them a little taste of what that might feel like, and to shift just a little bit. So for example, if they're drinking soda and they're drinking caffeine and they don't have, let's say, severe anxiety, in which case caffeine is just a bad idea. I just shift them to a healthier form of caffeine, because, the research shows a little bit of green tea, even a little bit of coffee, and we could, talk about that in more detail, but can be fine for a healthy person who's well rested. So if I could just get them to stop drinking soda and shift them to drinking green tea or black tea, or in the morning, even coffee if they like it, that it's easier for people, because now it's a beverage for a beverage. So I think that small shifts are easier than big shifts, even though I love the idea of going out and taking a brisk walk. I think it's a great idea. I think that little shifts are helpful for people. And then also, baby steps, and then giving them the experience of success. Like if I really don't drink soda for 2 weeks, how do I actually feel? How do I feel now? Because 2 or 3 weeks is long enough to get over the withdrawal process. I mean, the other problem with sugar and caffeine is that there's withdrawal on the other side when you stop it suddenly, and people feel terrible, and thus they don't want to stop. And you have to actually move through the withdrawal period. And sugar withdrawal can actually be quite intense. People don't know this, but for many folks, sugar hits the dopaminergic pathway or the dopamine pathway in the brain. That's the same addictive pathway that heroin uses. Okay, so sugar is an addictive substance. And when people stop it, they feel terrible. And you have to move through a couple weeks of feeling lousy before you get outside of the cravings. And a couple weeks later, you don't crave sugar in the same way because your body has adapted. So I do think for most people, picking one substance at a time, right? So we're not going to stop drinking, smoking, and drinking soda at once. Right. We're going to pick one. We're going to do it for a period of time. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, long enough to get past the withdrawal process. And then some kind of substitution is really helpful. I love your idea of walking if that works for folks, or substituting, something else that's healthier in its place, like green tea or black tea or something like that. All of those things are behavioral things that make it doable for people. And then, of course, nobody's going to do it until they're ready. So, that's the other piece is people can know this in their heads, but until in their bodies and their hearts they're really ready, it isn't going to happen.
No, and that's something I've witnessed several times, and I totally believe in it. But it's still, as somebody in my line of work, it's very disheartening and discouraging and depressing when you know somebody has an issue and you know what they can do to alleviate all their pain, or at least the pain revolving around this issue, and they won't do it. Even if they look in the eye and say, yeah, I know that'll work, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, but that's when we have to actually find out why. And this is what I try to do in my office, because there's a reason. Again, we are not stupid. We are making decisions because we think it's to our advantage. So we have to get at the heart of what is really going on for that person, and often it's pain. I'm avoiding pain. I'm avoiding trauma from the past. I feel horrible about myself and don't think I deserve it. We have to actually get at the root causes here in order to love ourselves and to change. I mean, I've said this for many years, but to expect, for example, a man or woman to lose weight because you tell them that they look bad or they are unhealthy is unrealistic. People lose weight because they love themselves, not because they hate themselves. So until we can assist someone to get to that place where they feel like they deserve a life that's better, or they deserve to feel better in their body, they're not going to make those choices. It's that transition. And what I like about the body intelligence and body wisdom process is it's taking people out of their orientation on other people's opinions and sinking them inside their own intelligence, sinking them inside their own sense of what they want and what they need. Because until we do that, until we're oriented to our own well-being and our body's well-being, it's hard to make those choices.
I agree. And, when I teach my students and clients that you have to lead with your head, and until you have the mindset for better health, which would encompass everything, whether that's only weight loss or, other components that lead to good health. Until you have that mindset, your body's not going to follow. You can't lead with your body because you're always going to defeat yourself and sabotage yourself.
I mean, it's an interesting distinction. I would argue that the mind, and this is current with, neuroscience research, isn't in your head. The mind is in your whole body. We are thinking and processing information with a nervous system and a thinking system that includes gut intelligence, for example. There's a massive plexus of nerves in the abdomen. There are more neurotransmitters in the abdomen than there are in your head. There's a massive plexus of nerves around the heart. So I think that when we talk about leading with your mind, what I'm hearing really is leading with your intelligence. But I wouldn't say that that's different from your body. I would say that's intrinsic to your body, maybe different from your cravings. That's certainly important and valid. But I would say that if you listen deeply to your body, most people make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. So that would be a gut instinct or a gut feeling?
Exactly. Or heart intelligence.
Right.
To me, all of those are important. And, just like, if you're choosing, a business partner or a romantic relationship, you're really going to listen to not what the chatter of your brain says. Oh, this checkbox and that checkbox. I'm not saying those aren't important things, but ultimately we're going to make that decision based on our gut instinct, based on a deeper sense of perception that involves our unconscious, that notices all these things about this person and puts them together in a package that allows us to make intelligent decisions based on really what is ancient wiring. Our instincts, our more intuitive knowledge about a person or a situation.
And what I was responding to is what you said about how a person needs to love themselves. They're not going to lose weight if they hate themselves. And what I understood from that is that you have to start with that first, and your body will follow, because dieting won't work if you hate yourself and you want to punish yourself. If there's some underlying reason that you're trying to, punish yourself.
Yes. And I absolutely agree with you there. So, and the studies on dieting are terrible. I'm sure you're aware of that. So,
oh yeah, you're better off not.
Yes, because the correlation between obesity and dieting is absolutely direct. The more diets you've been on, the more obese you are. And it's partly, I think you're right about this self-hatred cycle that we get into, where we restrict. And by the way, that makes the body crave. The body thinks you're starving it, so it lowers metabolism. All these other adjustments happen that are troublesome in terms of long-term weight loss. And then there's the rebound effect, where there's more eating and more hunger and lower metabolism. So, I really think that slow changes over time make a much bigger difference for most people than going on a diet and trying to make quick changes.
Now, when we're talking about following your gut feeling, but not necessarily your intellect, how does a person differentiate between and know which to trust?
It's a great question, right? Because sometimes, if let's say I were, preparing for some event I was nervous about, and my body wanted chocolate. It's craving chocolate. Not
Right.
that ever really happens to me, of course, like yesterday. But, my body is craving chocolate. Is that a gut instinct, or is that an emotion in my body? So, part of what I think is important, even though this sounds detailed, is differentiating between the sensation, I feel, cramping in my belly, and the emotion, am I hungry or am I anxious, right? And that when we get a better sense of the language that the body uses, we have, I craved chocolate yesterday, rough day at work, very busy, lots of crazy stuff going on. I ended up having a little bit of chocolate because it was fine. But knowing, right, that I was actually anxious, and that what I needed was, to take a walk and go for a run after work, which I did. Outside, right? And it's those, easy sort of being easy on the body, I think, is also important, right? I'm not judging myself for being anxious and craving chocolate and having some. I am, knowingly doing it in a way that's not damaging to me, and then taking care of business by coming home and getting outside and working off those feelings in other ways and talking to people I love. So
Good.
this is, in my opinion, being Bodywise. And there's nothing perfectionistic about it, right? None of us are perfect. None of us are ever going to be perfect. But it's just being in dialogue with our physical beings in a way that's kind and that's attentive.
I love it. I love it. Can you tell us some of the other books you've written?
Sure. So my most recent book is actually called The Man's Guide to Women, and that was co-authored with my husband and John and Julie Gottman. And I'm lucky to have been with my husband for about 30 years. And relationship work is something we're pretty passionate about because I think good relationships are remarkably health-giving. That's not just me and my own experience, but really according to the research for men and for women. Being in
Absolutely.
positive relationships have incredible benefits to mood and to health. So, and I think relationship is, I always call it the cauldron, right? It's people going in with some Disney idea that this is going to be simple and easy and I'm going to be happily ever after. Surprise! This is
Right.
relationship is an enormous amount of work, but wow, the reward is huge. So this book, The Man's Guide to Women, is trying to unpack that mystery that is femalehood. And I have to say, as a female, wow, tough to be in relationship with a woman because we're so complex, right? And changing all the time. And what we try to do in this book is use research. So John Gottman, many of you may know, is probably the foremost couples researcher in the world, very science-based. So there's nothing in that book that's not based on actual studies, not what we think, this is no sort of anecdotal summary of men and women. It's actually, what do we know by the research, some of which is surprising. For example, that men are the key to whether relationships work or not in general. Obviously, that's not 100% true, but often true. And so that book is written for guys. It is very accessible. It's funny. There are illustrations, there are cartoons, there are short chapters. So it's written for men to help.
Big font, lot of pictures. Good. You got. I'll run right out and buy that one.
So that is available. And then my husband and I authored a series of books with Mantak Chia on Taoism and sexuality, and really taking a holistic integrative approach to healthy sexuality for men and women. And those are the multi-orgasmal. And we wrote the first one of those over 20 years ago, and they've been very successful. And it's interesting because I think sexuality is important. I think it's an important part of health. That puts me, by the way, completely within the traditions of Indian or Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine, both of which are 5,000 years old, both of which include exercise, diet, and sexuality as part of health and medicine. It's really just Western medicine that kind of exits sexuality from the picture, and in which many doctors are uncomfortable talking about it. But my observation is that when people are well, when people are healthy and vibrant, and they're inhabiting their bodies, sexuality is a natural expression of our well-being. And that if there are issues with sexuality and we address them, again, we often uncover all of the other aspects that are preventing wellness and vitality. So, having taught around healthy sexuality for years, we are talking about body image. We're talking about relationship. We're talking about previous trauma. We're talking about trauma from the medical profession. And we're processing all of that. And these are the things we have to pull out of the way for people to really inhabit their bodies joyfully.
That's fantastic. That's really something that I think more people could pay more attention to, especially couples that have been married for a long time. What do you say to you've been married for 30 years. I've been married for, where are we, 16 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of older couples that just sort of bicker, and they look like they're just, kind of best friends, but secretly don't really like each other. How do you keep the spark in it? Do your books address that?
Yes, absolutely. So the multi-orgasmic couple in particular, I would say, addresses that, as does The Man's Guide to Women. So, there are a couple things that I think are really important. One is that as we get older and I'm going to say for everybody, but particularly exacerbated if you are a couple that have decided to have kids, because they're so distracting, and they take so much time. Not that they're not amazing and wonderful. I have 3 kids myself, but if you're raising a family, it's easy to get distracted by work, to-dos, children, and just the pressure of living, right? And putting food on the table and taking care of business. And in that environment, it's hard for sexuality to really vibrantly live. And we think that sexuality should be like it is when we're teenagers, which is that it just happens spontaneously and it's fabulous and it's easy. And that's not true. For many people, as we get older, you have to actually make a place in your life for sexuality. And I would argue that it's worth doing, because the benefits of sexuality to a relationship are absolutely enormous. They increase bonding. They increase marital satisfaction. It's actually hormonally good for us. So, as men and women age, sexuality, orgasm, even sex with yourself, by the way, though if it's with your partner, you get more partner benefits. But even sex with yourself increases your prolactin, which helps with patience. It increases your estrogen and testosterone. It's like a hormone tonic, sexuality. When the body feels good and when the body experiences pleasure, you can imagine that is having all kinds of positive impacts in terms of our neurotransmitters and our hormones, and it is. So I think sexuality is a vital part of any relationship. And I also want to be clear that doesn't have to mean, some crazy, hot, movie star sex experience. It can be gentle. It can be short. It can be more prolonged. It could be once a week. It could be phenomenal, but once a month. It could be every day. I mean, every couple has their own pattern. I mean, in the same way I talk about being body-wise about your own body, I think every relationship has its own agreements and intelligence. And there's no right way to do this thing. But I would strongly encourage couples to stay physically intimate in whatever way works best for them.
So whatever works for you, if it feels good, do it, in other words.
Well, I would say if it brings you real joy and pleasure, right? Because there's some things that we do because they bring us temporary pleasure and then we feel bad about ourselves.
Oh, I gotcha.
I'm just saying. But if afterwards you feel good in your body, your skin is glowing and you feel more joyful, yes, do that. Do that.
Right. Wonderful. Well, you've given us a lot to think about here. And I believe you said you have a special offer you want to tell my audience about?
Sure. So if you go to drrachel.com, and that's DOCTOR, RACHEL, drrachel.com, and you sign up for my mailing list, I will send you the first 3 chapters of my new book, Bodywise. And that includes the Bodywise quiz. So you can have a sense of what your own body intelligence is. You can actually measure it and get a sense of where you are on the scale, and then get some basic tools to start having body intelligence.
Wow, I'm going to take the quiz. I can't wait. And I'm not being sarcastic. I will have a link to your website, and of course, all notes on my show notes page at livefitpodcast.com. How can people get a hold of you, or do you have any parting shots for us?
Just that, I really feel that when we are all more body-wise, that we are more wise in terms of our choices on earth. And then I'm very passionate about healing ourselves and healing the earth. And that your body really is a part of the greater environment. And when we make those body-wise decisions, we make decisions that are also good for our planet. And I am passionate about preaching that gospel more widely, because we are at a point of crisis in our planet, and we definitely need to be paying a little more attention, not just to our own bodies, but to the body of Mother Earth as well.
Yes, I could not agree more. In fact, I have Dr. Richard Oppenlander coming on the show pretty soon. I'm supposed to interview him tomorrow. So he is very much on board with sustainable food for humans. And of course, that goes into taking care of our planet where we live, because I don't want to go to Mars and I don't want to live in a space station.
Me neither, because we're Earth creatures.
This is the most wonderful place ever. I love this planet. I love nature, and I don't want to see it go away.
Amen. I agree.
All right, Dr. Rachel, it has been wonderful speaking with you. I wish you the best of luck with your new book and continued success with your men, women, orgasm, and relationship books.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Did you know that LiveFit offers a variety of programs to help you live healthy, fit, and free? It's true. I offer a 10-day sugar slash solution to help you break the cycle of the sugar roller coaster. Plus, there's LiveFit Lean, which is a 28-day weight loss plan. It comes complete with everything you need to get back on track to good health. It provides a menu of every meal, recipes, snacks, a shopping list, and some really simple exercises that you can do anywhere in as little as 2 minutes a day. There's LiveFit Classic, which is my 9-week program that uses the pillars of good health to reshape your misguided efforts and lead you towards intuitive eating and exercising patterns. And finally, LiveFit for Life, which is my health coaching program that will fine-tune your progress and hold you accountable with direct feedback and solutions to guide you to the fit body you want. All these programs can be found at livefitlean.com/programs.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Podcast. Please subscribe and share with someone you care about. Read show notes, articles, resources, and learn more about our weight management programs at livefitpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and always remember to live fit.